We've stored our single Dahlia tubers in cling film. When we prepped them, they were dry and they were coated in a fine coating of sulphur. This is to prevent fungal rot, or to reduce the risk of fungal rot. The reason for wrapping is twofold. One is to prevent drying, and it's particularly good at doing that because each individual tuber is wrapped in a layer of cling film which is virtually waterproof, so they're pretty well guaranteed not to dry out during the storage time. And the other big killer is rotting, so the idea is to prevent fungal rot if at all possible, hence using the sulphur powder, which is one method. There are lots of other methods. You can dip them in bleach, you can use other compounds which are antifungal. But the American Dahlia Society, or if you are an American listening, the American Dahlia Society, I've used this method for many years and have tested it and have found it to be pretty successful, with failure rate of about between 5 and 10% when you come to use the tubers in spring. Another good advantage, I think, of this is that the environmental impact of wrapping Dahlia tubers in this way is actually quite low. Okay, we're using plastic, and that's obviously not good, but a fairly small amount of plastic, and I'd be willing to accept that rather than using peat or using even vermiculite and other resources like this. Have got higher resource value than these. So the advantage of using this method is that, first of all, you've got a controlled environment in there. Each of these dahlias is in its own compartment during the wrap, and hence we've got a pretty good control over what happens to that. We can store it in a good manner, and we'll talk about that later. But we know that it's not going to dry out, and if it did fall foul of an infection, then we can recognise that and do something about it pretty quick for probably individual tubers, rather than the whole batch being infected, which is what often happens with other methods of storage. You open the box in spring and you find that they've all been infected by fungal rot, which is spread throughout all. So we'll talk a little later about how we're going to look after these over the storage period. It's easy to check whether there's any rotting, or whether perhaps the tubers have been hit by freezing, which would turn them to mush. Handling during the storage period is actually pretty easy. You can see this little bunch here. There's 150 Dahlia tubers, each one of which will become a new plant next year. 150 in such a small space, easily controlled. We can see what we've got, we can check them during the winter, and we can emerge into spring with confidence. The disadvantage of using this method is, first of all, it takes quite a time to do the actual prep. Arguably more time than it takes to use other methods. We use plastic, which is a disadvantage, and this method is suitable only for single tubers, so we've had to divide them during the preparation process down to a single tuber, which is then wrapped in its own cling film compartment. You could not do this with a collection of tubers. That really will be very risky, because you've got air pockets, you've got areas where infection can spread throughout the whole tuber mass, and this is for single tubers only. We'll now go around to where we store these, and a little chat there about how we check them during the winter. And this is where we store our dahlias for the winter. simple vegetable box. We're going to cover it with newspaper to keep the light out largely. You can see we've got a temperature sensor in here which monitors the temperature continuously, but that's not necessary, of course, if you know that you're not going to freeze. We simply lay the collections one on top of another. You'll notice we've put in how many tubers are in each of these packs so that we can monitor what we're going to do next spring, decide how to plant stuff out and such like. So in this little box, as you can see, we could get some more in, couldn't we? In this little box there are 260 Dahlia tubers. I mean, that, you know, is a massive advantage of this method, is that you can move this around, you can put it somewhere safe if it's going to freeze, and you can check the Dahlias individually, which I'll show you now how you do that. So every now and again, once a month or so, you'd come along, check that everything looks okay. You can see the Dahlias through the cling film, which is quite nice, and you can feel them, to feel for rot. If they're rot, they go mushy, they begin to go soft, so you can get a good idea that that's happening. You can look at these with confidence and say, right, that bunch is okay, not drying out, and there's no signs of rot. Easy to do. So each one of these packets, I'm just feeling the tubers, looking at them through the cling film. It's so easy, it gives you so much confidence that these are storing fine. Okay. And then we put them to bed.